Hi everyone, today I'm going to be doing a review of The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson, aka Mistborn Book 2. It has been a very long time since I have done a Cosmere Reread review because I'm catastrophically behind on my Cosmere Reread, but I am trying to catch up this month. We'll see how that goes. You might also notice there's a bookmark in here because my husband just started reading this book this morning after finishing his reread of Mistborn #1, so I had to pry this out of his fingers in order to have it as a prop for this video. Hopefully the video will end up being worth the sacrifice. I'm in kind of an interesting place with this reread because this is a book I've read quite a few times, but also not in many years. I read the Mistborn series as well as the other early Cosmere books a bunch of times in college. When I was a broke college student and I was doing a lot of reading on Kindle at the time, and I didn't really have a good library ebook system going on. So what I would do is when I wanted to read, which was most of the time, I would actually go and look through my Kindle and see if there were any books I wanted to reread before I went and bought any new books on Kindle. So I ended up rereading some of my favorite series a ton of times in college. And then now it's kind of funny to look back on that. I mean, I've always been a big rereader, but probably right now is the least I've ever been rereading because I've started this channel. I'm reading new things a lot of the time, and I have this huge TBR of books that I want to get to. So it's been interesting doing a deliberate reread project, and I think it's something I kind of want to continue doing, although geez, I have so many books in the Cosmere to finish before November. I shouldn't be planning any future reread projects right now. When I was reading Brandon Sanderson way back when, and this was before even The Way of Kings was out, so the only books that were out were Elantris, Warbreaker, and the Mistborn trilogy, and I feel like probably my favorite book then was Warbreaker. I really liked Elantris. I really liked the first Mistborn book, and I don't remember really enjoying the second and third Mistborn book as much, but surprisingly, on reread, I really loved this book. I was shocked by how much it impacted me emotionally. I don't always expect that from the Mistborn books, but I thought it was really powerful and I felt really wrapped up in it, and it just really hit me in the feels. I should have mentioned this earlier, but this review is going to contain spoilers for Mistborn: The Final Empire, and I'm going to do my best to keep it spoiler-free for The Well of Ascension, but I'll probably have a spoiler section at the end of this review to just talk about a few characters and things that I can't really talk about in a spoiler-free way, and I will let you know when that's happening and timestamp it and everything. Before I even get into the review, I should just say I have an ongoing battle with my husband over whether the character is Elend or Elend. So I'm gonna bow to my husband here and say Elend, but if an Elend slips out, I'm really sorry. That's for some reason how I've always read that name. So The Well of Ascension starts off with a bit of a time skip from the end of Mistborn 1. Elend is now the king of Luthadel, being assisted by Kelsier's crew, and things are not going very well politically. The whole Final Empire has kind of descended into chaos. People are fighting over territory, and in general, people think that Elend must have the Lord Ruler's adium reserves, so Luthadel has become a very desirable target, and a bunch of armies are heading towards it, wanting to take things over. Elend also isn't doing a great job being an authoritative king, and Vin is struggling to protect him against assassins and also dealing with her own feelings about how everything is going. We also have Sazed, who has left to try to perform his duties as a keeper now that the Lord Ruler has fallen. He's going to different villages and trying to pass on the knowledge that the Terrius keepers have preserved, and he is struggling because he's finding that people are really not interested in all these religions that he's been studying and teaching about, but he's trying to help them with other more practical knowledge, and he also starts getting drawn into dealing with things like prophecies and more mystical things that are going on. Don't want to give any spoilers, but things that are maybe even larger in scope than all of the political infighting that's going on. So if the setup for Mistborn 1 was this question of what would happen in a world where the prophesied chosen one hero failed and the Dark Lord has been ruling for 1,000 years, the setup for Mistborn 2 is very much what happens after the Dark Lord gets overthrown, and how do you kind of pick up the pieces, and what if it's not all smooth sailing from there. So I think I just really connected to that theme a lot better than I did 10 years ago or so. So this book isn't any kind of heist story. It's more a question of how do you be a good leader and how do you develop a functional government. One thing that I didn't remember liking in this book at all that actually really connected with me this time was the romance between Finn and Elend. I never thought of it as one of my favorite romances, and there are still things about it that do really bug me when I read them, but weirdly, at an older age, I kind of connected to this portrayal of young love, where you have these two characters that have been through really intense experiences together already, and they care about each other so much. They really love each other, but they are still afraid that they aren't meant to be together or they aren't right together, especially Vin. And I kind of understand now, looking back at my own young self. I remember now what that feels like. I remember when I started dating my husband, and I really liked him, but I was afraid that he was way more popular and outgoing and social than I was, and I felt like this very shy, nerdy person, and I wasn't sure that I was the right person for him. And luckily, as I got to know him better, it turned out that he was also a huge nerd, and he just needed me to bring out that side in him. But I kind of really connected to Vin's feelings in this book about caring about somebody, but genuinely being afraid that you're not going to be a good fit. There's also a lot more stupid behavior from them in this book, and sometimes they are fixating on the relationship to a point that I didn't really enjoy. Especially there are times when they really have bigger things to be dealing with and they're getting very distracted by their relationship. I'm not sure, maybe that is kind of true to life. I mean, I think there are a lot of examples that we've seen when people are getting distracted by very small petty things when they should be dealing with a larger problem. So I can't say that's not true to life. There was a degree of communication issues and bad communication in this book that, it could get a little tiresome in the romance department sometimes, but I actually really felt like I understood what it was that Sanderson was trying to portray in their relationship, and it was something that I related to. Another thing I connected to a lot more in this book than I did when I was younger was there's an arc about Elend, learning to become a leader, and not just, he needs to learn not just the political theory and what he thinks the right things are, but how to change how he acts and dresses and conveys himself and talks to people in order to have the effect that he wants. And I feel like maybe it's just from growing up, but I understood a lot better. I've done a lot more thinking in my own life about how to be the kind of person I want to be and how I need to present myself and how I need to be. I think that's something a lot of us deal with in our everyday lives, just trying to figure out how to be the person we want to be, but also learning the skills and doing the things that we need to do in order to accomplish the things we want to accomplish. So I feel like I didn't understand that so much in my early 20s, but it's something I understand a lot better now. And I actually really connected to the way that Sanderson portrayed that kind of character development as well. Elend has a very specific plot arc where he needs to learn to be this leader, but pretty much every character in this book, again, needs to make a choice about who it is that they want to be and how they want to present themselves to the world. I think that's something that comes across a lot in Sanderson. The characters usually have choices about how they're going to deal with things and who they're going to be. There are some other elements of this book that are pretty typical Sanderson. All the talk about leadership and politics. I feel like it was just kind of an expansion of some of the things he talks about in Elantris, with characters talking about how to govern and be a good leader. You have the typical discussion of religion and its truth, and different characters having different relationships to belief and religion. There's a very complicated magic system that is still getting gradually revealed in this book. From what I remember, in typical Sanderson fashion, you also get a ton of information dumped at you at the beginning of book 3 that kind of fills out everything you've learned in books 1 and 2. But I keep getting surprised by how slowly we're getting information in these books about how the different metallic arts and the magic systems work in the Mistborn world, because I've read the later ones and, fan theories and all this stuff where everyone has all the information. And it's kind of interesting to go back to the point where you're still learning how things work. Overall, I really enjoy still reading his action scenes. Sometimes they read a little too cut and dry to me, like sort of play by play, almost scripted for TV, but also really cool things do happen with this magic system and with the action scenes. So overall, that's an aspect I enjoy. Something that kind of stood out to me as strange that I don't remember noticing in this series is you have all these characters that are in relationships, but it's very chaste. It did sometimes feel strange to me that there were things like Vin had her own room separate from Ellen's, even though they were clearly in a relationship, but she had turned down his proposal of marriage before the start of the book. Things like that, where it just felt a little forced, the degree to which we saw basically no sign of intimacy between characters that were in relationships. But I'm completely fine with the fact that he's chosen to write the books that way. It doesn't really impact anything. It's just a choice in his writing style. And I'm not such a huge fan of romance in general. Like, it didn't really bother me. Overall, I think this is one of the best middle books in a trilogy that I've ever read. I think the way he made this not feel like a middle book was by making book 2 and 3 kind of feel connected, and book 1 almost feels a little more like its own thing. So this book, because we don't have Kelsier, it feels like a restart. It feels very different. It doesn't just feel like the middle volume in a trilogy somehow. So overall, I really I can't remember liking a middle book in a series more than this. And in general, I have to say, I felt more emotionally affected by this book than I did by Mistborn 1, and that really surprised me. I think that's everything I have to say that's not a spoiler for the Well of Ascension. There are just a couple characters and things I want to mention really quickly that are spoilers for the Well of Ascension, so if you haven't read it yet, you should probably stop watching the video here. I've mentioned in other videos that I really like when authors use the epigraphs at the beginning of chapters in creative ways. I think that's what it's called. You guys all know what I'm talking about anyway. There's that section of italics that is always at the beginning of the chapter in fantasy novels, and in old books, I think it was usually just info dumpy information that the author either couldn't be bothered or just couldn't figure out how to integrate into the text. And so I really like when authors start using that in a more creative way. In this book, you have the writings of Quan, who you're getting the real thing in the epigraphs, but then the characters have a transcription of it, and it starts getting subtly altered by Ruin. There's that word again. I've mentioned I can't say Ruin, and now we have a villain in this series named Ruin, so that's tough. But anyway, it's getting subtly altered to the point where characters are making decisions based on things that are not true. And if you go back and look at the italics and compare that to what the characters are reading, you realize like, oh, that is different. That has been changed. But you only realize, I think the first time I read it, it only happened, after the end of the book, where I was like, oh yeah, they were saying it was getting changed. And then I go back and look and compare and can kind of see how he was using that to kind of play with us in our perception. Because while you're reading it, at least for the first time, you're just completely believing what the characters are reading. There's no reason to really doubt it. I also just couldn't talk too much about some of my favorite characters because they're spoilers. For example, I really love the Khandra and Tensoon, and the fact that the Khandra imposter ends up just having taken the place of the other Khandra. Tensoon is a really great character in general, and I think the way that his friendship with Vin gets gradually developed throughout this book is one of the best things that Sanderson does in the Well of Ascension. I think there's one conversation I remember in particular where Vin starts making an effort to get to know him, and you see she is slowly starting to break down his barriers, even though he is very resistant. He really doesn't want to talk to her. But by the end of the conversation, you realize that both these characters start discovering their commonalities. And I think I just really like the way that friendship gets portrayed and that way that it slowly develops, how she goes from completely mistrusting and hating Khandra at the beginning, and how both of them have kind of a close bond by the end of the book, even to the point where he betrays his contract in order to save her life. I also really enjoyed the relationship between Sazed and Tindwyl. I was surprised by how little time they actually even get together as kind of a couple, it makes me realize why it was so devastating, like why he's so devastated later in the series at her death, because they barely acknowledge their feelings and get together before she gets killed. And for some reason, I just remembered that as being longer. But I really like their characters. I know there's a point in book 3 where I get really annoyed with Sazed's plotline. He has this very depressed storyline, and I remember finding it very tiresome to read, and I have the feeling that I probably will again. But I really like his journey and who he is as a character in this book. I really like Tindwyl as a sort of counterbalance for another Terrace keeper who is a contrast to Sazed, and even though she is supposedly more of the good model of what a keeper should be, she's basically just as terrible at being neutral as Sazed is, and she ends up making her own decisions as well. So I really liked them. And I've mentioned before, one of my favorite characters in this series and the Mistborn lore in general is Marsh. I don't know why I find him so oddly fascinating. Maybe it is my thing for immortal characters, but we don't really understand at all what's going on with him in this book, and he doesn't get a lot of screen time, but he does have a very important role to play. I really just enjoyed the sections that he was in, even though we really don't understand what's going on with him as a Steel Inquisitor. I just think he's a very cool, interesting character, and I've always wished we got more of him in these books, because I've just always been kind of fascinated by who he is as a person. Because it's something I've talked about in the past, I feel like I do want to mention Lord Set as an example of a disabled character that I felt like was done pretty well in this book. He's a character that, despite the fact that he had some sort of illness, probably some polio, like a Mistborn version of polio as a kid, and was left unable to walk, he still is very much confident, in charge, brash. He's a guy that knows his place in the world, and he knows that he was meant to be in charge. He's not the most likable character, but just the fact that he is portrayed as a very active character who's doing things, the disability really isn't that important to his character, other than the part where Vin decides, obviously, he must be Mistborn because, obviously he's faking, and, he's so confident, even though he's pretending he can't walk. So, he must be a Mistborn. But actually, he's not. He doesn't have any powers at all. That's just who he is as a person. So him and his full family, his daughter who's in a relationship with Breeze, I actually quite enjoyed those characters. And I just had my camera switch off because I've been talking for too long, so this is probably a good place to wrap up. I was just going to say, I think I like how Sanderson raised the stakes in the series. He has honestly somehow higher stakes at the end of book 2 and more characters die. And it was just funny because book 1 felt so life and death, like you had these characters embarking on this seemingly doomed struggle to overthrow the Dark Lord. But still, the end of this book was much sadder, really, even though, of course, you had that pivotal death at the end of book 1, which was Kelsier's. Even so, I feel like we're left in a much more sad and desperate place at the end of this book. It's funny, when I think about this book, I don't even really think that much about the larger plot line with Vin setting Ruin free and the prophecy. Like, it's in there, it's important, but the political stuff and them dealing with that, I feel like that's more the core of what this book is about, and the other stuff is kind of a setup for the Hero of Ages, which is book 3. So overall, I really enjoyed this reread. In fact, I was surprised by how much I enjoyed this book, because like I said, I didn't remember it being one of my favorites in the Cosmere, but I think it was a better book than book 1 in a lot of ways, and I'm looking forward to reading book 3. So thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this reread review. Hope you didn't watch through the spoilers if you haven't read this series before yet, and please subscribe if you want to see more videos from me.